it's been like 2 years since El Salvador made Bitcoin legal tender. When they first did it, the IMF came out and they said, this is really irresponsible. They were worried that this would like, bring El Salvador down. The bonds started to trade lower into distressed territory. You recently called the IMF the original shitcoin, which I think is amazing. And I've looked into the IMF a lot, and one of the worst loans that they've made was to El Salvador during their civil war in the 80s, where they basically just picked a side that they wanted to win, gave them the money, and then all the money was used to fund for weapons, not to build any kind of productive endeavors for the economy. It was just kind of wasted in the war efforts. And so they got straddled with all this debt. And here's the IMF saying, "Hey, don't adopt this perfect money. We're worried about your situation." But fast forward to today, and what would you say to the IMF? Because it seems like El Salvador has only grown stronger since they adopted Bitcoin.
No, that's accurate. That's true. I mean, the IMF is a central bank, so central banks don't like decentralized money. So I think that's the whole story.
Yeah.
And they don't like the idea that a country could adopt Bitcoin and decentralize itself away from the global banking cartel and away from centralized banks and everything that comes with the centralized banks. Certainly in Central America, if you read John Perkins' book, Confessions of an Economic Hitman, this has been the countries where America has sent the economic hitman to topple governments and to start coups. There's been like 50
Mhm.
coups, many of them
Yeah.
sponsored by the U.S. in this area over the years. And the U.S. has always treated Central America as quote unquote their backyard. They don't really see it as independent. They think it's somehow an appendage to the U.S. in some way that they have just total control over. If you look at the history of, let's say, the Ford Motor Company or other corporations, and certainly um, what became Chiquita bananas, originally not U.S. fruit, but I'll think of the name in a second. But anyway, the banana cartel was, of course, exploiting the Central American countries in a quite damaging way for years and years. And this is hard to break up. Right, the IMF would prefer that it had a client state and an easy mark to sell their dodgy loans to, but Bitcoin is rewriting the history books and with decentralized money and obviating the need for central banks. I mean, central banks, as I was saying before, they're coming to the end of a 300-year period, a cycle. There's no point in having a central bank, and so now that I think they're going to become extinct, and the region is not benefiting greatly from El Salvador taking on Bitcoin, and so the IMF is just becoming irrelevant, really.
Yeah, I tend to agree, and I think that El Salvador is proving to be a great case study for other countries to look at. I mean, when you look at things, I saw you tweet something about how, in terms of Central America and the Caribbean, it has the fastest growth rate in terms of the fintech industry there, like up 25%, and El Salvador is leading the way. And
Hmm.
so you guys, Stacy and you and actually Jimmy Song, helped kind of develop a course for the locals there to help them teach him how to develop on the Bitcoin protocol. And you guys just had your first graduating class, I believe. So can you talk a little bit about that program and why you guys decided to start that?
Yeah, absolutely. So it was about a year ago or so. Jimmy Song came to El Salvador to teach a class in his book, Programming Bitcoin.
Mhm.
And this was really, Stacy identified the need to educate local developers and programmers in El Salvador because to kind of grow your own homegrown talent. And so this little pilot program with Jimmy went really, really well. And so the idea was, well, maybe we should just canvass the entire country. So Stacy organized what became now Kubo Plus, which is the country had these cubos already in place. They're local community centers. So Kubo Plus is built on this concept, and to reach out to everyone in the country to try and find the best and the brightest in the country, work with universities, find really talented people, and bring them into like almost a Top Gun school. So for 3 weeks, really, the best and the brightest came to San Salvador and El Zonte, the beach community, Bitcoin Beach. And the best professors, the Bitcoin professors in the world were brought together. The best students were brought together, and at the final kind of leg of this Top Gun school, you had 21 of these excellent students came together and finished the course, and they are now getting jobs. They're getting these high paying, high level jobs that you get if you're a Bitcoin developer, which is a global industry. It's a global. You have global demand for this type of talent. And so now this is at the end of this, really the first semester, the first season, if you will, of Kubo Plus, and the graduating class has opportunities. They're getting jobs, and of course now the next season, the next school year, if you will be, of course, much bigger, because the word is going out that this is really a way to enter into the upper echelons in the high income world is through Kubo Plus and through Bitcoin development. And so it's been a really fantastic success. Stacy and a crew of filmmakers from Hollywood were in El Salvador making a documentary about
Oh,
this.
cool.
So, and this documentary will, I think, drop in the next week or so.
Oh, nice.
And it really tracks. It's a brilliant documentary. Filmmakers we've known for a long time, who are excellent filmmakers, and so they came in, and Stacy directed this documentary, which is covering Kubo Plus. So you'll see really the students and what's going on with the students, and great shots of the country itself. And because El Salvador has not really been featured in many films or TV over the years, there's only one film that was made in the 1950s, I believe, that had El Salvador in the film. But it's just a really gorgeous country everywhere you look. The scenery is fantastic, and that's part of this great documentary is just seeing this country, what it looks like is really gorgeous. So that's the Kubo Plus. So that's part of what Max and Stacy do in El Salvador. We try to figure out ways to make Bitcoin country, make it, get the education, get the visitors, help people here, help people there. That's what we've been doing.
Yeah, and another thing that you've been working on, I mean, you're wearing the hat right now, is Volcano Energy, which I definitely want to touch on. It's kind of one of the things that were an early announcement when El Salvador first announced that it would make Bitcoin legal tender, was they would use the Volcano Energy to mine Bitcoin, and it got everyone really excited. But then in June 2023, it finally kind of announced some details around it, and you are the chairman of the Volcano Energy. And so, can you tell me a little bit about the project?
Yeah, sure. There's been a lot written about it, and I encourage people to do a little Google search on Volcano Energy and get all the press releases and the stories that have been written about it. There's a lot of information out there. I guess the big, when we first started talking about geothermal energy in the country, we talked about different ways to tap into that and how to capitalize it. And after, really, it wasn't that long, I guess 18 months, 19 months,
Hmm.
this idea of launching this company, Volcano Energy, finally came together. So it's really a PPP, public-private partnership. The government is a stakeholder, and we work with the government. And it's because the lead time for geothermal is pretty lengthy. We're talking, 4 or 5 years to develop geothermal. The idea is, in the meantime, kind of to fill in the gap here, we're doing wind and solar. So
Okay.
wind and solar is launched first, and this is Bitcoin mining using renewable energy, wind and solar. And as we build out the geothermal comes online. Um, in a few years. So, and then you'll have all three: wind, solar, geothermal working. And we think that we can be a pretty substantial player in the Bitcoin mining space and have a nice, significant part of the global hash rate. It gets back, I guess you could say, I was very early, maybe 5 years ago, in talking about what I called the global hash race or the global hash war.
Yeah.
People were saying that, oh, what if this country bans Bitcoin? What if this, what it's going to get banned? And at that time, I said, and this was going back 5 years or more, I said the more likely scenario is that countries will start to competitively mine Bitcoin because they'll recognize it as the hardest money ever. And just like they would want to hoard gold, and you had the gold standard and people mining gold and developing the wealth of nations with based on gold, you would have the same thing happen with Bitcoin. And so now this is exactly what we're seeing. So El Salvador at the moment, I would say, is winning the global hash race because, this is really the only country that's actively making it policy that we want to mine and we want Bitcoin on our balance sheet. And that's how this all got going. It's very strategic. The President Bukele recognized this early on, and he sees that this is the future. So we raised $1 billion for the project, and 250 million has been deployed already. So we're on the ground right now, and it's happening. So our ambition is to win the global hash race. We want the most Bitcoin. We want the biggest Bitcoin position. We want the cheapest mining. We want the best miner. This is the future, and I think we want to be number one. We want to be absolutely at the top of the pyramid on this.